Hi there, and welcome to Inside Quantum, the podcast telling the human stories behind the latest developments in quantum technologies. I'm Dr. Stephen Thompson, and as usual, I'll be your host for this episode. In previous episodes, we've talked with researchers working on developing some of the fundamental aspects of quantum technology. Today, we're going to talk about how quantum technology and quantum-inspired techniques developed in academia can be applied to solve real-world problems. It's a great pleasure to be joined today by Professor Román Orús, our research professor at the Donostia International Physics Center in Spain, and also a co-founder and chief scientific officer at Multiverse Computing. Román, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
Before we get into talking about multiverse computing and your role in the company, let's first talk about your scientific journey to this point. And let's, if I may, go right back to the very beginning. What is it that first got you interested in quantum physics?
Yeah, that's a good question. Actually, I got interested in quantum physics when I was at the university doing my undergraduate. You know, I like many things in physics. I like relativity, cosmology, and so on. But at some point, I had, I just had quantum mechanics, and I had a remarkably good teacher, okay, and an amazing lecturer who gave an amazing course on quantum mechanics, and I was just amazed by how interesting and let's say counterintuitive the theory is, and I just fell in love with that. So I decided that I wanted to continue, okay, with that, and then I just moved on, finished undergraduate, and I went on to do a PhD, and it was very clear to me that I wanted to do a PhD on quantum computing.
So why quantum computing in particular then? What was it about quantum computing that really stood out and grabbed you?
Yeah, actually, I had I considered a couple of options. I also considered doing a PhD in particle physics and high energy physics, and also on quantum computing. At the end of the day, I decided to go for quantum computing because I saw that there was a lot of potential. We are talking about the year 2000 or something like this, and quantum computing was not at all at the same stage as it is right now. It was like in a very, let's say, embryonic stage. The hardware was not there. Many of the algorithms had not been yet developed and so on. But it was very clear that quantum technologies were going to have a deep impact in the future, and that there was going to be a kind of a scientific and also technological revolution. And at the end of the day, that's what made me choose quantum computing, let's say, over other fields of physics.
So it was the future potential of the field, I guess, to change the world that interested you.
Yeah, exactly. So it's not that I wanted to change the world at that particular point, because when I started my PhD, everybody essentially believed that, quantum computers will take a longer time to be developed than what we have seen. No, I mean, when people ask me, hey, when do you think we are going to have a quantum computer? And I typically say, well, I don't know, maybe in 100 years, okay, or something like this. So more or less, I started working on quantum computing thinking that what I was doing, I couldn't see the impact in real life, probably in my whole life. But at the end of the day, it turned out to be wrong, okay, because the technology has developed much faster than what everybody expected. But what was clear to me is that quantum technologies were, in particular quantum computing, was something that was going to change the world, okay? It was very exciting. There were many open problems, and then I just decided to go for that.
Okay, so how did you get to this current point? So you're currently a research professor. How did you go from PhD to research professor? What was your career journey?
Yeah, so I got my PhD back in 2006 at the University of Barcelona on quantum computing. Towards the end of my PhD, I started working on quantum algorithms, and towards the end, let's say towards the middle end of my PhD, I started to work also on quantum many-body systems, because everything was connected to some computational tools that are called tensor networks. Turns out that one could apply them to quantum computing, one could also apply them to strongly correlated systems. And at the end of the day, I kind of bridged the gap between these two disciplines, and I was doing both things actually. So when I finished my PhD, I went for a postdoc to the University of Queensland with Vidal. I was there working for years in his group on tensor network methods, okay, very much focused on condensed matter physics actually. And I went to the Max Planck Institute of Quantum Optics in Garching with Ignacio Cirac at the theory group. also working on quantum information and strongly correlated systems. And then I became a junior professor at the University of Mainz, where I spent 5 years actually working essentially on tensor network numerical simulation methods. And after that, I got a tenure position as a research professor in San Sebastián at the Donostia International Physics Center, which is a great center for theoretical physics. And I just decided to continue working on what I had been doing until then. So essentially tensor network simulations for quantum matter. But essentially at the same time, it was when everything started to boom in quantum computing as well. So I started to do once again quantum algorithms and quantum computing, and actually, everything that I had been doing in the context of condensed matter physics turned out to be extremely useful also for understanding this new branch of quantum algorithms that people are proposing nowadays. And that's how I ended up being a research professor. Yeah.
So it sounds like the work you've done covers a lot of different fields there. You mentioned many body physics, you mentioned a little bit of quantum optics, and also quantum computation. Are these fields, do you find them very different to each other, or do you find that the overlap between these fields came naturally just because of the questions you were interested in?
Yeah, the overlap came naturally. Actually, when I started doing research in my PhD, I started doing quantum information and quantum computation. But by that time, since the hardware was not so developed, the field of quantum information was full of people that at the end of the day somehow diverted and started doing in parallel also condensed matter or quantum optics or even high energy physics. The point is that there are natural overlaps between all these disciplines. Okay, and for me it was very natural to work on both of them. So I always thought that I had one leg on quantum information and one leg on condensed matter physics. Okay, and everything that I was doing condensed matter physics, it was useful for quantum information and the other way around. So one of my research lines was to understand the entanglement structure in quantum many-body systems. Okay, so there are quantum correlations and so on, the ones that you use for teleportation and for quantum key distribution and all these very nice quantum technology protocols. But the whole point was, well, how does this behave in a quantum many-body system? Because of course there is entanglement there, and there you start playing with phases of matter and so on. And it's really an interdisciplinary field. It's not that you can set very, very defined boundaries between fields. Okay, actually, lots of results in quantum information are very useful for condensed matter physics, and also the other way around.
I see. So you're really at the interface then between the sort of theoretical computer science aspect of quantum information that works out what are the computational operations we want to do, and the hardware side that says, okay, we have these trapped ions or atoms or something, and how do we enact these computations? And you're somewhere in the middle, I guess, translating between these two different extremes.
Exactly. That's where I am.
Okay. Interesting. So would you say that the sort of big picture goal of your work is the development of a quantum computer then, or the supporting the development of a quantum computer?
Yeah, well, actually, I would say supporting the development of a quantum computer and also the applications of a quantum computer as it is right now. There are many, and also the investigation of new algorithms. Okay, so these new algorithms can be useful for many things. It can be useful for understanding phases of matter, okay, which is an open problem, but they can also be useful for understanding other types of physical problems and even for applications beyond physics. Okay, so because at the end of the day, if one has a quantum computer, you want to use it for something, and you need to find applications in other fields, also in industry. How are you going to apply a quantum computer to solve problems in finance, in energy, in material science, in health, and so on? Right now, my current research goes a little bit along this direction. So how to develop applications and new algorithms for quantum computers. Okay, but also, of course, also using all this knowledge that we already have and that we have accumulated over the years of all these numerical algorithms that we know for quantum many-body systems. Okay, this is extremely useful. What is nice is that all these algorithms that we have been applying to study quantum many-body systems over many years, now it turns out that we can also apply them, for instance, to improve machine learning. Okay, which is an extremely, let's say, transversal tool. You can apply it to essentially everything, or to optimization problems, and then you can mix it with quantum computing and so on.
So then, you've mentioned a lot of different bits of work that you've done. Is there anything that stands out to you as something that you are particularly proud of?
Yeah, well, actually, that's a tricky question. So I'm proud of all the work that I've done. Okay, but that's not a very politically correct answer, probably. I'm proud of all my papers. I think that to each one of them there is something important in my opinion, of course. But I'm particularly proud overall of the work that I've done in tensor networks. I think that when I started working in quantum many-body systems, there were many open questions. There were many physical systems that were essentially impossible to simulate, say, with tools such as Monte Carlo, exact diagonalization, and so on. And then all the work that I did together with other people, such as Guifré Vidal, mainly, and also with Ignacio Cirac, in particular as well, and other people, on tensor network numerical simulation methods, I think that was very important because it allowed to actually reach other physical systems that were impossible to simulate. We proposed several algorithms for simulating, say, some models and some physical systems that were simply too hard for Monte Carlo. I think we did a great job with that. And what we couldn't foresee by then, our motivation then was to essentially, find new numerical algorithms to simulate and to understand phases of matter that we cannot understand nowadays. But it turns out that in time, all those algorithms have found applications that we couldn't foresee when we just invented them. No? So for instance, some people in string theory now they are doing also tensor networks, but most importantly, we are applying tensor networks to machine learning, as I was explaining you right now. No? So, and all those algorithms that we developed to simulate, fermionic systems in 2 dimensions, the Hubbard model, and so on. Well, it turns out that now we can apply them to do anomaly detection or to do classification, fraud detection, and so on. So they have applications that go much beyond physics, and I'm very proud of that. I'm really proud of seeing how those bits of research that we did turn out to have applications and implications much beyond what we actually expected.
So is this where the idea for multiverse computing came from then, to start exploring these applications for these techniques outside of the, I guess, kind of narrow realm of quantum simulation and take it out into the real world?
Yeah, actually, the motivation for multiverse computing was a bit broader. I mean, in part it was this, but also because we had this feeling, we had this internal question that somebody asked, and it was, well, can one apply quantum computing to financial problems? Okay, because we are talking here that quantum computing is going to revolutionize the world and so on and so forth, but nobody knows why. We know that, we are going to apply to crack some crypto systems, and then cybersecurity will have problems and so on. But what are going to be the applications of quantum computers in real life? What can you do once you have a quantum computer? How is going to change something? Okay, and then there are different verticals, different fields where quantum computer could have an impact. Of course, the first thing that comes to your mind is material science or chemistry, because those are quantum systems. But then you say, well, okay, but there are other, situations where there are very strong and hard computational problems. And the most important, and one of the most obvious is finance. Okay, in finance, in banks, in financial departments of large corporations and so on, it's full of programmers, mathematicians, physicists, and so on, doing lots of simulations of Monte Carlo, of optimization, of machine learning, and the financial institutions, they are consumers of algorithms. And finance looked like a very natural, let's say, place to apply a quantum computer. But by the time that we were thinking about this question, there was essentially almost nothing done. There were a couple of papers where people, they had proposed some ideas of how to apply a quantum computer to some financial problem, but it was not very clear what they meant, and everybody that you asked, they meant something different. And then we just decided to think about that seriously, and we came up with a very clear picture of what could be done with a quantum computer in finance and what could not. Okay, and we wrote a paper about that. Okay, and that's how Multiverse started. So essentially, the 3 authors of that paper were 3 of the 4 founders of Multiverse. Okay, the paper was a hit. Many people liked it, and that's how at some point we decided to start the company, because we saw, okay, here there are applications. Okay, we need to take this seriously. We see that other people are just launching startups. We have the feeling that we could do it perhaps even better. Okay, we have a very clear picture of what can be done in this field, in particular with applications to finance, and I think that, well, why not?
So you mentioned there that there are lots of quantum computing startups beginning to appear. How is Multiverse different from other startups? Like, for example, take some of the very high-profile ones that have gone public recently, like IonQ, for example, that are developing quantum hardware. How is Multiverse different from a company like IonQ?
Well, there are two types of quantum companies, actually three. There are the ones that do hardware, like IonQ, or Rigetti, or D-Wave. And there are the ones that do software, like us, okay, like Multiverse Computing, like Zapata Computing, like QCware, OneQubit, no? And then there are the ones that do software and hardware and software, okay? An example is Xanadu, for instance. They are building a photonic quantum processor, but then they are also doing some software, okay? These are the full stack companies, no? So Multiverse is a software company. We don't do hardware. Okay, so this is the first differentiation with respect to IonQ. Now, within the realm of quantum software companies, I think that we are pretty unique because we were born with a very strong focus on finance, okay, whereas most of the rest of the companies were very generalistic when they started, okay. But when we started, we were very much focused on finance. And then we've always been working very close to real problems, very close to the client. Okay, we don't work on academic problems or on toy models. That's from day one. We only work on a problem if there is a client that has that problem, because that means that it's relevant. Okay, and for us that's one of the defining factors. There are others. Okay, so the first one is the one that I told you. We only work with real problems, so no academic toy models. Second, we combine quantum computing with tensor networks and with other techniques which are called quantum inspired. Okay, and third, and this is very important, we try that our solutions and our algorithms, they must be as easy to use as possible. At the end of the day, one thing is a research department at a research center, and another thing is a company where you're building a product. Okay, so if you do research, you can do your research for your colleagues, for the rest of the people that are quantum engineers or quantum physicists. But if you are in a company and you are building algorithms and solutions for the industry, then the guy that is at the other side, they are not, all these people, they are not quantum engineers. Okay, so they don't need to know about Hilbert spaces and quantum mechanics to use whatever you produce. So you need to provide solutions that are the most powerful solutions in the world, but also super simple. Everybody needs to be able to use that, because then you just you can access the whole market. I think that these are the three defining factors of Multiverse, and those are the ones that have settled us a little bit apart from other quantum software companies.
So you mentioned software there, and if I understand right, there are two types of software that Multiverse is specialized in. One is software to run on actual quantum computers, and one is more, I think you call it quantum inspired, so algorithms that can be run on classical computers. When Multiverse launched, quantum computing was, and I guess still is, very much in its infancy. So are there examples of algorithms that can be run on current quantum computers, that can actually solve real-world problems at the moment?
Yeah, actually, that's a good question, and that's one of the also one of our defining factors. Many people think that for running something useful on a quantum computer, you need a quantum computer with 1 million qubits, such as the one that we'll have, I don't know, in 100 years, hopefully, or something like this. Well, that's not true. Of course, if you have a 1 million qubit quantum computer, you can just do anything. You don't have to think very hard to find applications. Okay. The hard question is, we have these prototypes right now. They are noisy. They have few qubits, maybe 12, 20, 30, something like this. And then the question is, can we do something useful with these machines as they are today? Okay, we don't want to wait until we have a 1 million qubit quantum computer. I want to use these machines already for something useful. Okay, and the answer is yes. So different applications of a quantum computer are going to come at different speeds. Okay, for some applications, say for factorization, for instance. So for this you need or for searching on a database with Grover's algorithm. For this you need a very powerful quantum computer with many qubits, error corrected, and so on. But there are other applications, okay, and other algorithms that are better suited for these machines and prototypes that we have now. No, we think that there are two that are very promising. One is quantum optimization, and the second is quantum machine learning. Now, for quantum optimization, there is this machine by D-Wave. It's an annealer. It's a quantum annealer, and it's actually providing very good results in some real-life problems with real data. We've seen that. Okay. For quantum machine learning, it turns out that the quantum machine learning, there are many quantum learning algorithms that can be run actually on current devices. They don't require too many qubits. This is surprising actually, but it's true. They don't require, because in quantum machine learning many times you don't care too much about the speed up. Perhaps what matters to you most is the precision of the algorithm. Say for a classification problem, if you want to detect fraud, so 1% extra of precision in your algorithm turns out to be a huge amount of money of savings for the tax agency, for instance, okay, or something like this. Mm-hmm. Turns out that some of these quantum machine learning algorithms don't require of big capabilities of a quantum computer, and however, they are extremely difficult to reproduce, okay, with non-quantum, say, machine learning, including neural networks, deep learning, and so on. And this has even been certified in some situations by people such as Google. So with the machines that we have now, this type of quantum machine learning is going to be one of the first applications of a quantum computer. And of course, this is very important because this has applications in essentially anywhere. Okay, machine learning nowadays is just anywhere in our lives. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So you mentioned the two main avenues there are optimization problems and machine learning. You gave a few examples, but what are the sort of big picture goals? What can these techniques do for the financial market in particular? And why did you choose to focus on finance as opposed to any other market?
Yeah, so we started focusing on finance because there were lots of problems, okay, that could be tackled with quantum algorithms, many things related to optimization and machine learning, and other types of algorithms, okay, such as stochastic algorithms and so on. But in particular for optimization machine learning, there was a lot. And also the banks are very aggressive. They are consumers of algorithms, as I was telling you. And as soon as some bank starts using some computational tool, the rest of the banks need to start doing the same thing, because otherwise they lose advantage, and the fight between them is amazing. No? So that was a natural thing it was a natural field to start with. Okay, it was just natural. And then in terms of actual problems, well, there were some proposals, for instance, for doing portfolio optimization. Okay, so you have an investment portfolio, say for your pension funds, no, and you need to decide how to invest in order to maximize the returns, minimize the risk, so that when you retire, you just get the maximum returns. Okay. So when you mathematize this and put this in terms of formulas, turns out that this is a typical intractable problem. It's NP-hard, and all the solutions that you get with classical computers, they are suboptimal, and this is a typical thing to throw to a quantum computer.
So it's really provably an NP-hard problem to do portfolio optimization. Wow, I didn't know that.
It is. Yeah, it is. It is as hard as the Ising model in physics, which is also NP-hard, the generic Ising model.
So I guess this is where the connection comes from with the many-body physics then. So using techniques to solve the ground states of these many-body physics problems, which can also be NP-hard, I guess, in the classical case.
Exactly. It's a very simple connection. You have this complicated optimization problem in industry. Okay, it could be portfolio optimization. It could be optimizing the air traffic. It could be optimizing, the configuration of a protein, whatever you want. You describe it in terms of a cost function that you have to minimize, and then you put the variables, and the variables at the end of the day, you can discretize them in terms of bits. And once you get it in terms of bits, this is just a classical spin model. Okay, and then you are in the realm of many-body physics. You can apply anything that you learn in many-body physics to solve this problem. Yeah, that's how you make the connection.
I see. And if you make this mapping to a classically NP-hard problem, then that's a classical problem. So where does the quantum advantage come in? Why use quantum computers to solve this type of problem?
Yeah, because the problem is classical, but finding the solution to the problem is extremely hard. So, it's classical. It just means that as a matrix, it's a diagonal matrix, but finding the configuration of the spins or of the bit variable that minimizes the function, that's NP-hard. That's very complicated. So a classical computer, the best thing that they can do is to explore the landscape of possible solutions, but it's very inefficient. Whereas a quantum computer can put all these possible solutions in superposition, okay, and can explore the landscape of possible solutions much more efficiently than what a classical computer could ever do. Yeah. That's one of the reasons why quantum computers are much better for this type of problems. Also because they allow, tunneling between different configurations. Thanks to the tunnel effect, they allow also stronger correlations in the resistor. Okay, thanks to quantum entanglement and so on.
Okay, interesting. One specific thing I want to ask you about here is you've mentioned tensor networks a few times, and of course a lot of your previous research has been on tensor networks. I actually come from a many-body physics background, so I'm quite familiar with using tensor network techniques to study many-body problems. How do tensor networks have an application in something like finance? Because I guess if I think of a tensor network, I think of, okay, I want to look at some kind of one-dimensional quantum system that has, for example, area law entanglement or some quite specific properties where these techniques have been developed and where they work very well. How is it possible to use something like tensor network techniques in finance?
Yeah, so you just mentioned one-dimensional many-body systems. No? Mm-hmm. So there are, for instance, as an example, so there are many optimization techniques for 1D many-body systems. One that is very popular is the DMRG, the density matrix renormalization group, mm-hmm. But there are others. But at the end of the day, with tensor networks, at the end of the day, is nothing but a mathematical tool to represent high-dimensional vectors. That's it. Now, it turns out that these high-dimensional vectors show up in quantum many-body physics. Okay. But they also show up in many other places. For instance, they show up in machine learning also. So you want to describe neural networks, for instance, or you want to describe some support vector machines or some other type of machine learning algorithms. At some point, you are going to hit high-dimensional vectors. And this doesn't have anything to do with quantum mechanics. But once you have the same mathematical formalism, you can throw tensor networks also there. Okay. Moreover, so you know that there are optimization algorithms for tensor networks, but they are for finding ground states of Hamiltonians, okay? Mm-hmm. But now you can decide, well, my Hamiltonian is a classical Hamiltonian, and then I can also use tensor networks, okay? So, people have been using tensor networks for classical systems since the 60s, okay? The first one that started this was Baxter doing exactly solvable models, and Baxter did nothing quantum, he did everything classical, okay? So how to make the connection? Well, I just told you have a classical optimization problem in finance. You want to optimize your portfolio. You rewrite it in terms of bits, and suddenly you think that those bits are spins, and that's where you have your tensor networks. You can just draw your favorite tensor network optimization algorithm to optimize a portfolio, for instance. That's one thing. And also in machine learning, you can just use tensor networks to improve or even to develop new machine learning algorithms. You can also train a tensor network to recognize faces, detect fraud, and these type of things in the same way as you train neural networks.
So what are the plans for multiverse computing going forward? Are you continuing to focus on the finance market, or do you have plans to broaden your scope and look into other industries where optimization problems occur?
No, we are broadening the scope. Actually, this is something that is already happening this year now as we speak in 2022. We have started to work on other fields also. We have started to work in energy, okay, with some well-known energy providers. We've started also to work on manufacturing, on logistics, okay, problems such as predictive maintenance. So you go to a factory and you have to predict when a machine is going to fail, okay. This is a typical machine learning problem. These type of things. We are also starting to work towards the end of this year in health, also in chemistry. So we are diversifying our portfolio of solutions, We started in finance because for us it was very obvious, and that was the thing that we understood the most. We had several pilot projects in finance that were very successful. But the core of the algorithm of the things that we did in finance, that's universal. You can apply that to anything. At the end of the day, what we do is optimization, machine learning, and something else. And then, the application is just for finance, okay? But now, the same, say, optimization algorithm could be applied to problems in energy, and you just have to change the data and change the front end and so on. So that's what we are doing now. We started in finance, but now we are exporting all that we learn in finance to other fields.
It's really interesting to see how these tools developed in fundamental physics can be applied in this way. I guess speaking as a theorist, I remember coming to the end of my PhD and looking at what my options were and thinking, well, if I want to use the skills that I've learned in my PhD, research seems like the obvious way to go. Academic research seemed like the obvious way to go, but it feels like now there are more options, I guess, than there were however many years ago that was. So do you look for physicists to employ? Do you only employ physicists, or do you also look for people with other skill sets?
Yeah, no, we are actually looking for people with a wide variety of skills. I mean, of course, we are looking for physicists, we are looking for quantum engineers, we are looking for people that know also about tensor networks, but we also need, people that know about machine learning, software engineers, so people that really know how to code professionally. Okay, this is also very important for us. So yeah, we are looking for a wide spectrum of people. And here in Multiverse, there are people actually from many different backgrounds. So, I mean, it's not just people that did quantum computing as a PhD. We also have particle physicists here and so on. So at the end of the day, what matters to us most is not, I mean, what you know, your background, your knowledge is important, but what matters most to us, or at least to me, is the attitude, okay? So, if you have the right attitude, if you have a PhD in particle physics, you are going to learn quantum computing. That's not a problem, okay? Mm-hmm. But if you know a lot about quantum computing, but you don't have the right attitude, that's not going to work. So that's what most matters, actually. So you want to have this attitude of actually learning, being able to, try to navigate many different things, machine learning, tensor networks, quantum computing, and software engineering, and some other stuff. That's what's important. So we are looking for a variety of roles right here. Technical people, of course, but not just physicists, also mathematicians, computer scientists, engineers, a little bit of everything.
So it sounds like there's a lot of different things going on. How do you manage being a researcher and also being involved in Multiverse at the same time? These both sound like extremely busy jobs.
It's that's true. So I don't sleep too much. And apart from that, well, so the lucky thing is that both, let's say, activities are complementary. So it's actually like two sides of the coin. Okay, I'm essentially doing very similar things as research and in the company Multiverse. The research that I can do on quantum many-body physics or on quantum algorithms, okay, that's of course useful for Multiverse, and anything that we develop here at Multiverse about software and so on, it's going to be very helpful also for doing research on the other side. So at the end of the day, it's just like a natural continuation, right? There is really, I mean, both of them are attached. To me, they are not independent. And I just try to navigate both of them. But of course, you are right. This implies, I don't have too much free time. Okay, I have to run the company. And on top of that, I have to supervise my PhDs and students and also postdocs and so on. And but I think it's very exciting. I mean, I actually feel very lucky that I'm able to do this. I think that this is a very unique moment in history where quantum computing is actually becoming a reality, and I just don't want to be, let's say, excluded of this. Okay, mm-hmm. So I think that's a very interesting time.
Well, you mentioned there all the different people who are part of Multiverse and also running a research group and having PhD students. So one question that I like to ask every guest here is that physics has historically been a very male-dominated field. And in your sort of role where you're employing people both in your research career and also for Multiverse, how do you approach this issue? How do you ensure that your workplace is made up of a diverse group of people and is as welcoming as possible to as wide a range of people as possible?
Yeah, so that's very important for us here at Multiverse. So and also in the research at the APC. So particularly at Multiverse, we receive applications from everywhere in the world. Okay, literally from everywhere, and we receive applications that are really very different from each one is very different to each other. Mm-hmm. So in order to ensure that this is an interesting environment, I mean, well, we have a 30% of women here at Multiverse, including technicians and also, some C-level people and some of the directors including. And we take that very seriously. There must be a balance, okay? Mm-hmm. There must be a balance. And we, when we do our hiring process, we take that into account. So, and also in terms of, let's say, geographically speaking, we just hire the talent wherever it comes from. And then it's naturally diversified. Of course, we have contacts and agreements with the local universities. And here at Multiverse, we have people from Taiwan, from Mexico, from Morocco, from Spain, from France. I mean, it's like really an international company. It just happens naturally. People apply, and because you have a lot of visibility. And then, we just hire the people that we think that we have to hire. And naturally, it's very diverse. Okay, if at some point we notice that there is a strong concentration of something, we try to break it. Also, we try to, hey, look, maybe we are hiring too many people from Spain. This could happen. Okay, actually, it happened not so long ago, and then we decided, well, okay, that's true, and maybe we have to make this more international because we also have offices in Toronto and we also have offices in Paris and so on, and this is needed, no? So when we do the hiring process, we take all this into account. Okay, we try to balance the company as much as we can, and this is actually creating an extremely nice atmosphere to work. Yeah.
I see. So it is something that you actively consider when running the company. Yes. And actively work to maintain. Interesting.
Yeah. It's important. It's important because I think it's healthy. It makes the company healthier. Yeah. Otherwise, it wouldn't work so well.
Mm-hmm. And do you know if Multiverse is more diverse than other companies doing similar things, or comparably diverse to other companies? Do you have any data on how Multiverse?
No, I don't have data on the other companies, so I cannot compare. Okay. I think it's pretty similar, say, to other companies that I've seen, say, in Canada, but or in Toronto, for instance, where we also have a very strong presence. Compared to European companies, I don't know. There are not so many companies to compare with. So, and the ones that I know, they are smaller than us, so then it's difficult to compare. So, yeah.
I see. Well, maybe to round this off then, what advice would you have as someone who has experience in both the research and the industrial environments? What advice would you have for someone looking to get into the fields of quantum technology, quantum computing?
Well, work a lot. Yeah, no, but I would say that if you have a clear idea of what you want to do and you really like it, okay, you really need to like and to love what you do, because you're going to spend most of the time in your life working, and you better like your work or better don't do it, because and that's very important. You must have fun. I always told that to my students when I was teaching in Mainz, and I still. Here I have a research position, so I'm not teaching, but I still that to everybody. If you are not having fun for 2 or 3 days on a road, then there is a problem. Okay, so you need to really like what you are doing. And then I will say that, well, keep tuned to all these opportunities that are happening. Study and work very hard. Quantum machine learning, optimization. Machine learning is very useful. Okay, quantum computing is also very useful. Try to have as much background as you can. There are lots of free courses, lectures, and so on the internet that you can do, and they just give you a very good background on top of whatever you do at the university. So I will just try to go for all these free resources also, and keep an eye on what is moving, and also don't be shy. So, just go for it, have ambition, try to go in the direction that you want to go.
Perfect. Okay, I think that's a good place to wrap it up there. So, if our audience wants to learn a little bit more about you, where can they find you on the internet, on social media, anywhere like that?
Yeah, you just Google me and I show up everywhere. So.
Okay, we'll leave links to your website and social media profiles on our own website along with this podcast episode. So, thank you very much, Professor Román Orús, for your time today.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Thank you also to the Unitary Fund for supporting this podcast. If you've enjoyed today's episode, please consider liking, sharing, and subscribing wherever you like to listen to your podcasts. It really helps us to get our guest stories out to as wide an audience as possible. I hope you'll join us again for our next episode, and until then, this has been Inside Quantum. I've been Dr. Stephen Thompson, and thank you very much for listening. Goodbye.